When Khemui, the last king of the Second Dynasty, passed away, Egypt had just emerged from a period of civil war and fragmentation. He had restored peace by unifying the North and South. But with his death, the country required a new dynasty to maintain stability. It was at this turning point that the Third Dynasty began, marking the transition from an era of experimentation to a new epoch that posterity would call the Old Kingdom. This was a time when kingship no longer rested solely on military strength, but on absolute divine authority. The pharaoh was no longer seen as a tribal leader or temporary ruler, but as the earthly embodiment of the god Horus, the guardian of Ma'at, the cosmic order and divine justice. The administrative apparatus expanded. Officials oversaw grain storage, land management workshops, and religious festivals. A powerful class of nobles and priests began to emerge under the royal court, laying the foundation for a complex, centralized society. Trade flourished. Ships ventured into Sinai to procure copper and turquoise, down to Nubia for gold and ivory, and across the Near East to obtain cedar wood and resin. Agriculture remained the backbone of the economy, supported by irrigation canals and granaries that ensured surplus production to sustain the army, state construction projects, and the elite. The most defining feature of this period was the transformation in architecture and funerary practices. Whereas pharaohs had previously been buried in mud brick mastabas, limestone now became the primary building material. This marked a leap not only in engineering, but also in ideology. No longer content with perishable structures, the Egyptians sought to create eternal monuments, constructions as everlasting as the pharaoh himself. The Third Dynasty of Egypt began with King Djoser, circa 2670 BCE, also known as Netrikit. He is widely believed to have been the son of Khemui and Queen Nimethap, a powerful woman who played a key role in the transition between the Second and Third Dynasties. As such, Djoser was more than just a pharaoh. He embodied the legitimate continuation of both royal lines, securing political unity for the nation. Senakti or Nebka is sometimes listed as the first ruler of the Third Dynasty in king lists, but his actual existence remains uncertain. Aside from a few seal fragments and inscriptions scattered at Baikalof, no conclusive evidence of a reign under his name has been found. Ancient records like the Turin Canon and the writings of Manetho mention Senakti, but his placement and role are inconsistent, and he may have been confused with another ruler entirely. To this day, no pyramid or confirmed tomb has been linked to him, leading many scholars to conclude that if he did exist, his reign must have been brief, merely a shadow before Djoser truly ushered the Third Dynasty into the age of the immortal pyramids. Under Djoser's rule, Memphis was solidified as the center of political power. There, he developed an increasingly structured administrative system. Officials were appointed to oversee grain storage, land festivals, and the army. From this point forward, the image of the pharaoh evolved, not merely a military commander, but a supreme manager of the state's economic, religious, and civic operations. Economically, Egypt under Djoser experienced sufficient prosperity to embark on massive building projects. Archaeological evidence shows Egypt traded extensively. Gold and ivory were imported from Nubia, copper and turquoise from Sinai, and cedar and resin from the Near East, resources not found locally. Agriculture, still dependent on the Nile's flood cycle, continued to yield enough surplus to sustain not only the population, but also a growing bureaucracy, labor force, and military. In the realm of religion, Djoser was viewed as the keeper of Ma'at, the divine order responsible for maintaining harmony among humans, gods, and nature. During his reign, the priesthood took on an increasingly central role in organizing festivals and upholding the sacred order. It was in this context that the name Imhotep emerged, a high official, architect, priest, and physician who elevated funerary architecture to unprecedented heights. Imhotep would later be deified as a god of medicine and wisdom, one of the rare cases in Egyptian history where a mortal was elevated to divine status. Art and culture under Djoser also reached a new level of sophistication. Limestone wall reliefs began to show structured compositions, accurate proportions, and intricate detail. Hieroglyphic writing, which had previously been limited, was now regularly inscribed on stelae seals, used not only for ceremonial purposes, but also for administrative records. This marked a significant evolution. Writing had become an essential tool in state governance, no longer confined to ritual use. The culmination of Djoser's reign was the step pyramid at Saqqara, a marvel of human ingenuity. Prior to this, pharaohs were buried in mud brick mastabas, flat-roofed, rectangular tombs vulnerable to erosion over time. But through the vision and engineering brilliance of Imhotep, who served simultaneously as architect, high priest, physician, and scholar, the mastaba was transformed into an unprecedented achievement. A 60-meter-tall stone pyramid, rising toward the heavens like a divine staircase linking Pharaoh to the gods. Initially, Djoser only intended to build a single-tiered stone mastaba, a groundbreaking innovation in itself. But Imhotep boldly expanded the design, from one level to 2, then 3, and eventually 6 tiers, each smaller than the one below, forming the world's first pyramid. The result was not merely a tomb, but a stone proclamation of the pharaoh's eternal power. Surrounding the pyramid was no simple structure, but a vast funerary complex spanning over 15 hectares, enclosed by a 10-meter-high limestone wall. Within the enclosure lay the Hebsed Court, the ritual arena for pharaoh's rejuvenation ceremonies, temples for offerings, granaries, storerooms, and stone replicas of royal palaces, meant to recreate the entire kingdom for Djoser in the afterlife. Beneath the sacred ground, Imhotep designed a labyrinth of underground galleries and corridors, stretching for kilometers into the bedrock of Saqqara. Within these chambers, archaeologists found thousands of stone vessels inscribed with the names of earlier pharaohs, indicating Djoser's desire to present himself as a legitimate heir of Egypt's ancient legacy. The main burial chamber, where the king's mummy was placed, was lined with granite, an exceptionally hard stone transported from distant Aswan in southern Egypt. What is astonishing is that the entire structure was built in the 27th century BC, more than 4,600 years ago, in an era without steel tools, wheels, or modern pulleys. Tens of thousands of limestone blocks, each weighing several tons, were cut, transported, and assembled with precision, creating an eternal monument. The step pyramid of Saqqara was not merely Djoser's tomb. It was a cornerstone of the Pyramid Age. From that moment on, each pharaoh saw the construction of a stone pyramid as a sacred duty, a visible sign of divine kingship and immortality. And from that moment, the name Imhotep entered legend, not only as an architect, but as the first man to turn stone into a symbol of eternity, worshipped as the god of intellect and creativity. After Djoser's glorious reign, the throne passed to Sekhemkhet, circa 2660 BC, believed to be either his son or grandson. His reign was short, lasting around 6 to 7 years, so the legacy he left behind was less monumental. Yet it is precisely this brevity that makes the surviving monuments all the more remarkable, as they reflect the ongoing ambition of Third Dynasty rulers to carry forward the legacy of Djoser's step pyramid. Politically and socially, Egypt under Sekhemkhet remained stable. Memphis continued to function as a capital, with a well-structured administration and priesthood playing key roles. The economy remained robust, supported by agriculture and trade with Nubia, Sinai, and the Near East, ensuring the resources needed for construction projects. In religion, the pharaoh was still viewed as the embodiment of Horus and the guardian of Ma'at, with divine rituals continuing uninterrupted. The art of the time, particularly in small objects of ivory, bone, and stone, reveals that refined craftsmanship continued to flourish. The major architectural work linked to Sekhemkhet is the buried pyramid at Saqqara, designed by Imhotep and intended to surpass Djoser's pyramid in height. However, Sekhemkhet's early death left the project unfinished. Despite this, the very attempt shows that stone pyramid construction had become the expected standard for pharaohs, regardless of the length of their reign. Kaaba succeeded Sekhemkhet around 2650 BC. His reign, though brief, was marked by continuity and stability. Centralized administration was maintained. Trade with Nubia, Sinai, and the Near East continued, and agriculture thrived. Stone quarrying expanded to support building efforts. His reign is distinguished by the layer pyramid at Zayat el-Aryan. Though incomplete, this structure illustrates a new architectural experiment in pyramid design, distinct from both the step pyramid at Saqqara and the buried pyramid. The final king of the Third Dynasty, Huni, circa 2630 to 2613 BC, is often believed to be the father of Sneferu. Unlike his predecessors, he is notable for a series of small pyramids scattered across Egypt, from the Delta to Upper Egypt. These structures were likely not tombs, but may have had ritual or political significance, symbolizing the pharaoh's presence and authority across the land. Additionally, under Huni, relief sculpture and small statues reached a new level of refinement, while hieroglyphic writing became more standardized for administrative use. These architectural experiments and cultural advancements laid the direct foundation for Sneferu, founder of the Fourth Dynasty, to inaugurate the most magnificent era of pyramid building in ancient Egyptian history. With the beginning of the Fourth Dynasty, 2613 to 2494 BCE, Egypt entered the most glorious phase of the Old Kingdom, an era later known as the Pyramid Age. While the Third Dynasty had merely experimented with Saqqara and several unfinished structures, by this time, engineering had matured, pharaonic power reached its zenith, and the country's wealth was poured into unprecedented monumental projects. This was the age of king architects, beginning with Sneferu, who built the first smooth-sided pyramid, followed by Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, names forever tied to the eternal grandeur of Giza, the immortal symbol of Egypt. These were not merely tombs. They were stone proclamations of the pharaoh's immortality, testaments to society capable of mobilizing tens of thousands of laborers, extracting resources from across the Nile Valley, and organizing an entire state around one singular will, the eternity of the king. The Fourth Dynasty marked an era in which pharaonic authority became absolutely centralized. The king was no longer just a political leader, but the living embodiment of the divine on earth. Every aspect of society revolved around the pharaoh. Beneath him was a tightly organized bureaucracy. The vizier held supreme administrative authority, acting on behalf of the king in matters of storage, land, and construction. Nomarchs governed the individual provinces, nomes, managing taxation and labor recruitment, but they remained under strict supervision from Memphis, the central capital. The priesthood also rose in importance, directly managing temples and religious rituals, further strengthening the divine legitimacy of the monarchy. Meanwhile, the nobility and royal family grew wealthier. The enormous mastabas at Giza and Saqqara were not just tombs, but displays of elite privilege and power. The Fourth Dynasty's prosperity was rooted in Nile-based agriculture, supported by an intricate network of canals, reservoirs, and the river's stable flood cycle. Farmers cultivated wheat, barley, and flax, raised livestock, and supplied the kingdom's food reserves, stored in royal granaries. Beyond subsistence, international trade expanded. Egypt imported gold, ivory, and animal hides from Nubia, copper and turquoise from Sinai, and cedar, resin, and precious stones from Lebanon and the Near East. This wealth enabled the monarchy to mobilize tens of thousands of workers, farmers during the off-season, along with skilled craftsmen, to construct the colossal pyramid complexes. Such manpower mobilization reflects a surplus-driven economy capable of sustaining not just a bureaucracy and military, but also vast, long-term construction projects. The Fourth Dynasty also marked the peak of the pharaoh's divine identity as Horus incarnate, and for the first time, the king adopted the title Son of Ra. The solar cult, previously emerging, now became the cornerstone of state religion. The smooth-sided pyramids, unlike the earlier step forms, rose like rays of stone sunlight, symbolizing the pharaoh's connection to the sun god Ra. The priesthood of Ra became an increasingly powerful institution, organizing state rituals and reinforcing the sacred foundation of royal authority. Art in the Fourth Dynasty reached an extraordinary level of refinement. Statues of pharaohs carved from diorite granite and basalt displayed solemn, immortal features, while group sculptures, such as Menkaure with his queen, revealed a humanizing and intimate touch. Reliefs in temples and tombs depicted processions, rituals, craftsmen, and daily life, functioning both as works of art and as historical records. In architecture, pyramid construction underwent a dramatic evolution, from experimental designs like Mitam and the Bent Pyramid, to the fully realized Red Pyramid of Sneferu and ultimately reaching its zenith in the Great Pyramid of Khufu at Giza. For the first time in human history, stone structures made of millions of precisely fitted blocks were constructed on a massive scale, becoming eternal symbols of Egyptian civilization. Writing also became more standardized and widely used. Royal annals carved in stone recorded military campaigns, construction efforts, and festivals. Hieroglyphs appeared on stele, seals, grain records, and administrative documents. The frequent use of writing demonstrates a highly professional and complex state apparatus, deeply reliant on literacy for governance. Sneferu, the founding king of the 4th dynasty, who ruled from approximately 2613 to 2589 BC, is praised by later generations as the Architect King, for he left an indelible mark on the architectural history of ancient Egypt. If Djoser was the first to construct a stepped pyramid in stone, then Sneferu was the one who transformed it into the first smooth-sided pyramid, inaugurating an age of eternal monuments. During his nearly 25-year reign, Sneferu commissioned 3 large pyramids, each representing a leap in engineering and conceptual thinking. Located at the edge of the desert near Fayum, the Mitam Pyramid is often called a collapsed pyramid due to its current unusual shape, a square core standing stark and alone amid the sands. Yet behind its ruin lies a major architectural milestone. This was the first time Egyptian builders attempted to transform a stepped pyramid into a true smooth-sided pyramid. When newly completed, Mitam stood around 92 meters high, with a square base measuring 144 by 144 meters, making it one of the tallest structures of its time. Today, due to partial collapse, it reaches only about 65 meters, exposing an internal step core. Originally begun at the end of the 3rd dynasty, possibly under Huni, the structure was first designed as a 7-step mastaba, later expanded to 8. When Sneferu ascended the throne, he ordered it converted into a smooth pyramid by adding white limestone casing to flatten the steps. It was a bold innovation but fraught with risk. The outer casing was laid directly over sand and rubble instead of on a solid foundation. The result was structural instability. Over time, the casing slipped and collapsed. Archaeologists debate whether the collapse occurred during construction or shortly after completion. Unlike earlier, simpler mastabas, Mitam featured a relatively complex internal layout. The entrance, placed high on the northern face, led through a passage over 60 meters long to the burial chamber. The chamber, made of limestone, used sloping blocks and timber beams to support the roof, a primitive version of the corbelled ceiling technique seen in later pyramids. However, the design remained rudimentary, lacking the refinement of Sneferu's subsequent projects. Though a technical failure, Mitam represents the first attempt to shift from stepped to smooth pyramid design, setting the stage for major advancements at Dashur. Lessons from Mitam regarding angle, foundation, and stone arrangement laid the groundwork for the Bent Pyramid and Red Pyramid. For this reason, archaeologists regard Mitam as a laboratory of pyramid architecture. Despite its unfinished state, it stands as proof of the bold experimentation, trial and error, and determination of the ancient Egyptians in their quest to build eternal wonders. After the collapse at Mitam, Sneferu did not stop. He ordered the construction of a new pyramid at Dashur, south of modern-day Cairo. This structure, later known as the Bent Pyramid, became one of the most unique architectural marvels in Egypt, being the only pyramid in history with 2 distinct slope angles. The original plan called for a pyramid 129 meters high, with a square base of 189 by 189 meters, comparable in size to the later pyramids at Giza. In reality, it was completed at 105 meters in height. Its distinctive bent shape resulted from a construction error. The lower half was built at a steep 54 degrees angle, which proved too heavy for the foundation. When the structure reached about 47 meters, signs of cracking and subsidence appeared. To prevent collapse, architects adjusted the upper slope to 43 degrees, creating the unusual but graceful bent profile. Perhaps the most valuable feature of the Bent Pyramid is its raw white limestone casing. Unlike most pyramids, which lost their outer layers over time, this structure still retains much of its original casing, allowing us to glimpse the brilliant luminosity the pyramid once radiated under the Egyptian sun. When newly built, The entire pyramid likely gleamed like a ray of stone sunlight, in keeping with the solar symbolism of the era. The internal structure of the bent pyramid is also unique. Rather than a single entrance on the north face, as was customary, it has two entrances, one on the north and another on the west. Each leads to a separate burial chamber, both with core-belt ceilings supported by wooden beams. Archaeologists believe the original plan may have intended to merge these two systems into one central chamber, but the project was left partially unfinished. Though it did not achieve its initial goal, the bent pyramid remains a marvel of adaptability. It shows that ancient Egyptian architects did not abandon a flawed project, but instead adjusted and adapted to preserve its structural integrity. This process of trial, correction, and innovation helped them build the expertise that led to the resounding success of the next pyramid. Today, the bent pyramid is not only a testimony to early engineering, but also the only pyramid to retain much of its original outer casing, offering us a rare glimpse into the original radiant beauty of Egyptian pyramids. It stands as vivid evidence that before reaching perfection at Giza, the Egyptians embarked on a bold, creative journey of experimentation. Having learned from the collapse at Mitam and the mid-course corrections of the bent pyramid, Snefer and his architects finally applied all those lessons to build the first fully successful, smooth-sided pyramid in history, the Red Pyramid at Dashur. This was a decisive turning point, bringing the pyramid's form to eternal perfection, the true standard of Egypt's architectural legacy. The Red Pyramid, located not far from the bent pyramid, stands in Dashur, the new royal necropolis of the 4th dynasty, rising to a height of 105 meters, with a square base measuring 220 by 220 meters and a total volume of nearly 1.7 million cubic meters of stone. It is one of the largest pyramids in Egypt. More importantly, it is considered the first truly completed smooth-sided pyramid in history. Today, it is called the Red Pyramid due to the pale reddish limestone blocks that glow under the Egyptian sun, giving it a distinct red hue. Originally, however, it was fully encased in gleaming white Tura limestone, visible from dozens of kilometers away, shining like a beacon in the desert. Most of this outer casing was stripped away during the Middle Ages, repurposed for building homes and mosques in Cairo, leaving behind the red stone core we see today. After the bent pyramid was forced to change its slope mid-construction due to structural instability, Sneferu's architects chose from the outset a much safer 43 degrees incline, significantly less steep than the 54 degrees used previously. This decision allowed the colossal stone mass to remain structurally sound for over 4,000 years. Entrance, located on the north face, approximately 28 meters above ground level. Passageway, a descending corridor nearly 60 meters long, leading to a complex of 3 burial chambers. The burial chambers include the first 2 chambers, aligned along the passage, have vaulted ceilings nearly 12 meters high, constructed using core-belt masonry, a technique where successive stone layers are laid increasingly inward to form a pseudo-vault capable of bearing significant weight. The third chamber, likely intended as a main burial chamber, lies deeper within the pyramid, aligned perpendicular to the main corridor, and is notably spacious and structurally robust. Outside the pyramid, the structure is surrounded by subsidiary buildings, a mortuary temple, storage rooms, and an enclosure wall, though these lack the monumental scale of the pyramid complex built later by Sneferu's son, Khufu, at Giza. The Red Pyramid is widely regarded as the official final resting place of Sneferu, the king who inaugurated the age of smooth-sided pyramids. With this construction, the Egyptians proved they had fully mastered the techniques of pyramid building, from foundations and slope design to internal chamber systems. More importantly, the Red Pyramid served as the architectural prototype for all subsequent pyramids, particularly the Great Pyramid of Giza built by Sneferu's son, Khufu. It also demonstrated the extraordinary logistical capabilities of the Egyptian state. Tens of thousands of workers, over many years, quarried, transported, and precisely assembled millions of stone blocks, each weigh between 2 and 15 tons, with a level of precision that continues to astound modern engineers. Following Sneferu, the architect king who transformed the pyramid concept into architectural reality, the throne passed his son, Khufu, known to the Greeks as Cheops, who reigned for over 20 years. If Sneferu laid the foundation, then Khufu elevated that vision to its highest realization, producing the greatest structure of ancient Egyptian civilization, the Great Pyramid of Giza, the only surviving wonder of the seven wonders of the ancient world. On a high plateau in Giza, west of the Nile River, Khufu commissioned construction of the Great Pyramid, a colossal edifice rising to 146 meters, with each side of its square base measuring 230 meters, and built from 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons, totaling nearly 6.5 million tons of material. For nearly 4 millennia, it stood as the tallest human-made structure in the world, and it remains the last surviving wonder of antiquity. The Great Pyramid of Giza was not only massive, but also built with astonishing precision. Its four base sides are nearly perfect squares, deviating by only a few centimeters. The entire structure is aligned almost exactly with the four cardinal directions, with discrepancy of less than 0.05 degrees. Originally, the exterior was clad in polished white Tura limestone, causing the pyramid to gleam under the Egyptian sun like a ray of stone-born light. Inside, the pyramid houses a uniquely complex internal system. A descending passage leads to an unfinished subterranean chamber carved into the bedrock. The Queen's chamber lies deep within the pyramid's core, and the King's chamber, the main burial room, is constructed from red granite transported from Aswan, 800 kilometers to the south. The chamber ceiling is supported by layered, relieving chambers, a brilliant architectural innovation designed to distribute the immense weight of the structure above. Narrow shafts extend from these chambers toward the sky, believed to be sole passages guiding the pharaoh to the stars, symbols of eternal life. Surrounding the pyramid is a vast funerary complex, subsidiary pyramids for queens, mortuary temples, ceremonial causeways, and solar boat pits, including one excavated vessel over 40 meters long, underscoring the aspiration to ferry the pharaoh into the afterlife. Behind Khufu's name lies another critical figure, rarely mentioned but essential: Himeyinu, vizier, grandson of Sneferu, and widely regarded as the chief architect of the Great Pyramid. Holding the highest position beneath the pharaoh, he oversaw the entire project and coordinated the massive bureaucratic machine required to complete it. To construct this monument, Khufu and Himeyinu implemented a nationwide organizational system. Tens of thousands of laborers, mainly farmers conscripted during the Nile's flood season when farmland lay underwater, along with skilled craftsmen, engineers, and priests, worked continuously for nearly 2 decades. Contrary to popular myth, they were not slaves, but organized and compensated workers. Their daily rations included 4 to 5 liters of beer, several loaves of bread, and portions of beef or mutton, sufficient to sustain them through grueling labor. They lived in mud brick worker camps, equipped with communal kitchens, storage facilities, and even makeshift clinics. They worked in organized teams under foremen. Highly skilled artisans were often rewarded with land or valuable goods. The natural rhythms of the Nile made it possible for Egypt to mobilize such a massive labor force for its eternal monuments. Construction materials came from across the region. Limestone was quarried locally at Giza. Granite was brought from Aswan, 800 kilometers away. Cedarwood and resin were imported from Lebanon to build rafts for transporting blocks along the Nile. Stone blocks weighing several tons were hauled on sleds, lubricated with water or mud, and dragged up earthen ramps. Though the exact techniques remain a mystery, one thing is certain: to raise the Great Pyramid, all of Egypt functioned like a single, unified engine serving the pharaoh, from peasant farmers and artisans to priests and state officials. For Khufu, pharaonic power reached its most divinely exalted form. No longer merely ruler of men, the pharaoh was now the embodiment of Horus, the son of Ra, the supreme sun god. The Great Pyramid stood as a stone proclamation of this belief, a man-made mountain piercing the sky, affirming the pharaoh's immortality and eternal oneness with the cosmos. Yet Khufu's reign left behind a dual legacy. On one hand, it marked the pinnacle of organizational, architectural, and religious achievement. On the other, the immense burden such monuments impose on a populace may have sown seeds of future unrest. Nevertheless, the Great Pyramid of Giza has stood unshaken for over 4,500 years, an irreplaceable symbol of the strength, intellect, and eternal ambition of Egypt's old kingdom. After the death of Khufu, The throne did not pass immediately to his designated heir, but instead shifted to another branch of the royal family. Jedefra, 2566 to 2558 BCE, the son of Khufu and one of his lesser queens, possibly Meritites Ai or Henutsyn, ascended to the throne. He was likely not the originally appointed successor. This role may have belonged to another son of Khufu, but somehow Jedefra seized power. This has led modern historians to believe that his reign rested on the foundations of a lingering succession dispute. Interestingly, it was during this period that one of Egypt's most iconic symbols emerged, the Great Sphinx of Giza. Some 19th century scholars theorize that Jedefra had built the Sphinx to honor his father Khufu, especially since Jedefra located his royal complex at Abu Roash, separate from the Giza necropolis. This theory was supported by fragmentary records and the fact that Jedefra was the first pharaoh to adopt the title Son of Ra, directly linking the king with the sun god, an association highly consistent with the Sphinx, a symbol of the rising sun in the east. However, archaeological evidence today largely favors Khafre, 2558 to 2532 BCE, either the full or half-brother Jedefra and another son of Khufu. The strongest evidence lies in precise alignment between the Sphinx and Khafre's pyramid and adjoining temples. Many of the limestone blocks used in construction of the Sphinx also match the blocks from Khafre's pyramid, suggesting both structures were built nearly simultaneously. As a result, most modern historians agree that Khafre commissioned the Sphinx around 2550 BCE. The Great Sphinx of Giza remains one of the greatest enigmas of the ancient world. Carved from a single massive limestone outcrop on the Giza Plateau, the statue measures 73 meters long and 20 meters high, featuring the powerful body of a lion and the majestic face of a pharaoh. The ancient Egyptians believed it to be the embodiment of Horus of the horizon, the god of the rising sun, both protector of the Giza complex and eternal witness to the pharaoh's divine authority. Originally, the Sphinx's face was painted red. It wore the striped Nemes headdress in blue and gold and bore the uraeus, a sacred cobra, on its brow, symbolizing supreme kingship. The statue faces directly east, toward the rising sun, as if to guard the perpetual rebirth of the sun god Ra. In front of the statue lies the Sphinx temple, constructed from the very blocks quarried during the carving of the Sphinx's body. Together with Khafre's pyramid and its associated temples, the Sphinx forms a complete ritual axis, where the pharaoh was sanctified in direct connection with the sun god. But who exactly is the face of the Sphinx? This question has sparked debate for centuries. Some theories propose that the statue represents Khufu, builder of the Great Pyramid, and that it was erected by Jedefra to honor his father. This view is based on Jedefra's adoption of the title Son of Ra, which strongly fits the solar symbolism of the Sphinx. However, archaeological evidence continues to point elsewhere to Khafre. The stones of the Sphinx temple and Khafre's Valley temple match the limestone extracted during the Sphinx's carving. Their alignment with Khafre's pyramid further confirms that all were part of a unified project. Comparative facial analysis between the Sphinx and statues of Khafre also reveal a greater resemblance than with Khufu. Thus, the prevailing consensus among scholars today is that the Sphinx is a portrait of Khafre, constructed around 2550 BC to guard his tomb and affirm the pharaoh as a living embodiment of Horti. Yet, the absence of definitive inscriptions means the debate remains open, an enduring mystery that only deepens the statue's mystique. Over the millennia, the Sphinx has endured desert winds and countless sandstorms, often buried up to its shoulders. The ancient Greeks were awestruck by its presence, and Egyptians of the late period referred to it reverently as Hormake, Horus in the horizon. The statue bears scars. Its great nose is broken, possibly destroyed during the medieval period, and the once attached ceremonial beard broke off, with fragments now housed in the British Museum. Several later pharaohs ordered restorations, the most famous being Thutmose IV. As a prince, he is said to have slept beneath the Sphinx and dreamed that the god promised him the throne if he cleared away the sand. That dream was immortalized on the dream stele, a granite tablet placed between the statue's front paws, testament to the sacred aura the Sphinx has always held. Standing adjacent to Khufu's Great Pyramid, Khafre's pyramid rises with regal elegance, reinforcing Giza as the stage of dynastic power. Though smaller than his father's masterpiece, originally 143.5 meters high, with 215-meter-long sides. Khafre's pyramid appears more imposing due to its higher elevation and its retention of the original white limestone casing at the summit. Its interior is simpler than that of Khufu's. Two descending passageways lead to the central burial chamber, constructed with massive granite blocks and housing a dark diorite sarcophagus. During his reign, Khafre upheld his father's tradition of centralized power. He retained Memphis as a political and administrative capital and strengthened royal authority by placing nomarchs, provincial governors, under close surveillance by the royal court. As a result, taxes, agricultural production, and manpower from the provinces flowed directly to the royal household, ensuring a stable system with little to no internal strife during his rule. After the death of Khafre, the throne of Egypt did not immediately pass to Menkaure, as commonly recounted, but instead underwent a brief turning point. Baka, the son of Jedefra, seized the throne and ruled for less than a year. This fleeting reign left behind virtually no monuments or political achievements, serving primarily as a reflection of the internal power struggle within Khufu's lineage between the branch of Jedefra and that of Khafre. This interruption was quickly resolved when power returned to the main line. Menkaure, son of Khafre, ascended the throne. Though the pyramid he left behind is the smallest of the Giza trio, Menkaure's reign stands out as a unique chapter of artistry and humanism in ancient Egypt. Menkaure's pyramid originally stood at approximately 65 meters, only about half the height of Khufu's Great Pyramid, with a base length of 108 meters. Modest in scale, the structure was nonetheless meticulously crafted. Its lower section was clad in pink granite from Aswan, while the upper portion was finished in white limestone, creating a striking contrast. Alongside the main pyramid were three smaller pyramids for his queens, evidence of continued familial bonds reflected in royal funerary architecture. This was Giza's final effort to conclude the golden age of monumental pyramid building. What set Menkaure apart as a pharaoh was not just his architecture, but also his approach to royal sculpture. The most famous example is the statue group of Menkaure and Queen Khmer II. The king stands upright in traditional striding pose, but unlike earlier depictions, his presence is no longer distant or austere. The queen stands beside him, her arm gently embracing him in a gesture of deep affection, creating an image both regal and intimate, rich in humanistic expression. Other statue groups show Menkaure flanked by goddesses, such as Hathor and local deities, symbols of harmonious relationships between royal and divine power. These masterpieces were carved from black diorite, one of the hardest stones in Egypt, yet the sculptors rendered them with astonishing delicacy. The pharaoh's body is symmetrical, his face serene and refined, and the goddesses exude a graceful air of divine protection. For this reason, Menkaure's statuary is considered the pinnacle of Old Kingdom Egyptian sculpture, where absolute power was portrayed hand in hand with familial devotion and spiritual reverence. Menkaure's final years were marked by personal tragedy. His eldest son, who had been groomed to inherit the throne, died before him, leaving a void in the royal succession. Menkaure himself passed away before his pyramid at Giza was completed. Much of its outer casing remained unfinished. The pyramid, though the smallest among Giza's trio, thus became an incomplete legacy with profound symbolic weight. After Menkaure's death, around 2503 BC, the throne passed to another of his sons, Shepseskaf. Shepseskaf ensured the basic completion of Menkaure's pyramid, but much of the outer cladding remained unfinished, leaving the monument with a rough and exposed appearance today. Uniquely, Shepseskaf chose not to build a pyramid for himself, but instead commissioned a massive mastaba at Saqqara, Mastabat el-Pharaon. This unconventional decision marked the end of the Grand Pyramid tradition at Giza, symbolic close to the golden age of the Fourth Dynasty. During the Fourth Dynasty, as monumental pyramids rose in the sands of Giza, Egyptian society was being shaped not only in stone, but also through human labor and daily life. Society at this time was stratified, like the pyramid itself. At the summit stood the pharaoh, a living god, wielding absolute control over land, people, and religion. Below him was a royal family and nobility, buried in grand mastabas, wealthy and powerful. Officials and scribes formed the administrative backbone, calculating taxes, and recording events in hieroglyphs on wooden tablets and papyrus. Priests oversaw temples, granaries, farmland, and rituals, commanding wealth on par with the nobility. Craftsmen and artisans, stonemasons, carpenters, jewelers, weavers, potters, created statues, ceramics, linen, jewelry, and boats. Farmers made up the majority, living along the Nile, farming the land, raising livestock, and during the flood season, working on pyramid construction. Slaves and war captives did exist, but they were relatively few, primarily laboring in quarries or serving elite households, not the primary workforce behind the pyramids. Ordinary people lived in small mud brick houses with flat roofs, a few simple rooms, and a courtyard for drying agricultural produce. Daily meals were modest: bread made from emmer wheat, beer brewed from barley, supplemented with river fish, waterfowl, garlic, onions, dates, and figs. Beef, lamb, and goose were typically reserved for festivals or distributed to workers on state construction projects. In contrast, nobles enjoyed lavish banquets, with imported wine from Canaan, roasted goose, and honey cakes served on elegant stone tables. Clothing was generally made from linen. Men wore kilts, while women dressed in long, form-fitting gowns. The upper classes favored fine white linen, embroidered with gold thread, whereas commoners wore coarser fabric. Both men and women adorned themselves with jewelry, necklaces, rings, and earrings made from Nubian gold, gemstones, and ivory. They also used cosmetics for both beauty and protection from the sun. Kohl was applied to outline the eyes, red pigment from minerals served as lipstick, and scented oils or resin were used as perfumes. Hair was often shaved or cut short for comfort in the heat, with wigs, made of wool or real hair, worn especially among the nobility. People tended to marry young, and the family formed the foundation of society. While marriage was usually based on mutual agreement, Egyptian women held significantly more rights than in many contemporary civilizations. They could own land, inherit property, sign contracts, and even initiate divorce if dissatisfied. Families were typically large, both to ensure lineage and provide labor for farming and construction. After work, leisure took many forms. Games and sports were an essential part of life. Children played with clay balls, cloth dolls, and spinning tops. Adults enjoyed Senet, one of the world's oldest known board games, which carried both recreational and religious meaning. Popular sports included swimming, rowing, hunting, archery, and wrestling, activities that doubled as military training. Among the elite, hunting hippos and lions served as displays of strength and prestige. The calendar was filled with festivals tied to the agricultural cycle and the gods. People sang, drank beer, and danced under the moonlight, while priests performed ritual sacrifices in temples dedicated to Ra, Osiris, Isis, and Hathor. Music filled the air with harps, flutes, and drums, while dancers performed sacred routines in clouds of incense. These festivals were not just religious ceremonies. They were moments of communal bonding, when people could briefly forget the burdens of labor. The ancient Egyptians possessed remarkable medical knowledge. They used honey for its antibacterial properties, resins as antiseptics, and practiced basic surgery, including treatments for broken bones. Workers at Giza received care in field hospitals, and skeletal remains show clear signs of medical intervention. Yet illness remained a constant threat. Malaria, parasites, and construction accidents were widespread. As a result, the belief that death was not an end, but a journey to the eternal realm permeated all social classes. Even the poor were buried with pottery jars, loaves of bread, and bottles of beer, provisions for the afterlife. The Fourth Dynasty concluded with the brief reign of Shepseskaf. When the throne passed to Userkaf around 2494 BCE, the founding king of the Fifth Dynasty, Egypt no longer channeled all its resources into constructing massive pyramids. Instead, the king and the priesthood elevated the sun god Ra to the central position in religious life, transforming the pharaoh into the son of Ra, a divine intermediary between heaven and earth. Userkaf may have married Queen Khentkau-Zai, daughter of Menkor and member of the royal house of the Fourth Dynasty. Khentkau-Zai was buried in a special tomb at Giza with the title Mother of two kings of Upper and Lower Egypt. This has led many scholars to believe she was not only a queen, but may have acted as regent, or even ruled briefly as a female pharaoh before power was fully consolidated under Userkaf. Through this political marriage, the fifth dynasty inherited the bloodline of Giza, legitimizing the new royal line. If the fourth dynasty was synonymous with the grand pyramids of Giza, the fifth dynasty began with the rise of the solar cult. Userkaf was the first pharaoh to formally declare himself son of Ra, placing the sun religion at the very heart of royal authority. Rather than concentrate on a monumental pyramid, he commissioned a sun temple at Abu-Sir, a symbolic structure crowned with a stone obelisk reaching skyward like the first rays of dawn. His pyramid at Saqqara was much smaller than those of Giza, almost minimal in scale, yet this very modesty reflected a significant shift. The pharaoh's power was no longer embedded solely in stone, but in the light of the sun god illuminating all of Egypt. Economically, Userkaf strengthened and expanded Egypt's trade with the Near East. Timber from Byblos, copper from Sinai, gold and ivory from Nubia all became lifelines sustaining both the royal court and the sun temples. This laid the foundation for a new era in which the pharaoh ruled not only through stone and labor, but through faith and commerce. The throne then passed to Sahur, Userkaf's son, and under his reign, Egypt truly extended beyond its borders. Sahur became renowned for distant maritime expeditions. For the first time in Egyptian history, stone inscriptions recorded scenes of merchant ships crossing the Mediterranean. His fleet sailed to Byblos, modern-day Lebanon, to procure prize cedar wood for shipbuilding and temple construction, and ventured south to mysterious land of Punt, possibly modern Somalia or Eritrea, bringing back incense, myrrh, animal skins, feathers, and even sacred baboons used in religious rites. His mortuary temple at Abu-Sir contains exquisitely carved reliefs. The earliest stone documentaries showing merchant ships, war galleys, prisoners in procession, farmers delivering taxes, and nobles attending festivals. These carvings offer the clearest early evidence of the emergence of an Egyptian navy, while also reflecting a society increasingly complex, rich in trade, yet riddled with conflict. Sahur's pyramid, also at Abu-Sir, was far smaller than those at Giza, but distinguished by the sophistication of its relief art. Not only gods and pharaohs, but scenes of daily life, bakers, goose herders, and hunters, were carved into the walls, expressing the belief that the pharaoh ruled not only over the dead, but over the living. Notably, Sahur solidified ties with the Heliopolis priesthood, the cult center of Ra. This indicates that the fifth dynasty was gradually shifting from the absolute power of the pharaoh to a more symbiotic relationship with the priestly class. Though subtle, this change defined the era. The pharaoh was now not just a king, but a divine son of the sun god, ruling by the people's faith in eternal light. After Sahur, the throne passed to his son Neferurker Kakai, circa 2475 to 2455 BC, one of the most notable pharaohs of the early 5th dynasty. Neferurker began constructing the largest pyramid at Abu-Sir, but the monument remained unfinished upon his death. Nevertheless, his reign marked another major development. For the first time in history, the system of 5 official royal titulary names was standardized: Horus name, Neti name, Golden Horus, Praenomen, and Nomen. From this point onward, each pharaoh of Egypt was not just a ruler, but a sacred institution, with every name carrying symbolic religious and political weight, affirming their divine status. Neferurker is also known for the records preserved on Palermo stone, a priceless annalistic stele that lists detailed events during his reign, from offerings and distribution of temple goods to military campaigns and construction projects. It remains one of the few primary sources offering historians clear insight into the political and religious life of Egypt during this period. At the same time, Neferurker expanded the bureaucratic apparatus. Priests and officials began to gain increasing power, reflecting a gradual transition from the pharaoh's absolute authority to a system that shared power with Egypt's upper classes. Following Neferurker's death, the throne briefly passed to Shepseker, circa 2455 BC, likely from a different branch of the royal family. His reign may have lasted only a few months or years. The limited remains of unfinished monuments at Abu-Sir suggest his time on the throne was fleeting. This ephemeral rule indicates possible instability or succession disputes within the royal house. He was followed by Neferfra, circa 2455 to 2445 BC, a son of Neferurker, who came to the throne young but died prematurely after ruling less than a decade. His pyramid at Abu Sir, known as the Unfinished Pyramid, had only its foundations laid. His mortuary temple was later converted into a sun temple, reaffirming the continued dominance of the Ra cult as the central pillar of royal legitimacy. Despite its brevity, Neferfer's reign highlighted the fragility of kingship in this era, and the pharaoh's early death could leave behind incomplete legacies in both architecture and state affairs. After Neferfer's sudden death, the throne passed to User-Ini, 2445 to 2421 BC, either his younger brother or cousin. User emerged as one of the most distinguished pharaohs of the 5th dynasty due to both the length of his reign and his architectural legacy. He completed the unfinished mortuary complexes of his father and brother, ensuring continuity of royal tradition. His greatest achievement was the construction of the Sun Temple at Abu Ghirab, an imposing structure featuring a massive obelisk described as a stone ray of light piercing the sky. The temple's reliefs depict scenes of harvest, cattle herding, and joyful festivals, illustrating the rich tapestry of Egyptian daily life and the bond between Ra and the prosperity of the people. Under User, Egyptian art achieved new levels of refinement. Carvings of people and rituals shed their rigid forms and came to life, as if each scene were a stone film reel. The throne then passed to Menkaure, 2421 to 2414 BC. Though his reign was short and left little mark in historical records, sources suggest he too may have constructed a sun temple, though its location remains uncertain. His most visible legacy is a modest pyramid at Saqqara, often referred to as Mastabat el-Pharaon II. Though not as monumental as the works of his predecessors, it proves that pyramid construction continued alongside the flourishing of solar temples. After Menkaure came Djedkher-i-Sisi, 2414 to 2375 BC, one of the longest reigning pharaohs of the 5th dynasty. He is remembered not for vast religious monuments, but for administrative reforms. Under his rule, the role of the vizier, chief minister, was elevated, and the power of officials and priests became more pronounced. This marked a critical transition. The pharaoh no longer held all power alone, but began sharing influence with a wealthy and entrenched elite. Economically, Djedkher's reign was prosperous. Egypt exploited copper and turquoise mines in the Sinai, traded with Punt and Byblos, and extended influence into Nubia. Tombs of officials, especially viziers, began to include elaborate inscriptions detailing their titles, wealth, and rituals, indicating an increasingly complex state with broad administrative class. Djedkher was succeeded by his son, Unuz, 2375 to 2345 BC, the final pharaoh of the 5th dynasty. Although his pyramid at Saqqara was modest compared to the grandeur of Giza or Abu Sir, it became a milestone in Egyptian religious history. For the first time, the interior walls were inscribed with a pyramid text, a collection of spells, prayers, and rituals meant to guide the pharaoh's soul into the afterlife. These texts represent the oldest surviving religious literature known to humanity, laying the foundation for the later coffin texts and Book of the Dead. In addition to religious inscriptions, the reliefs in Una's mortuary temple vividly portray scenes from everyday life. Bakers kneading dough, hunters herding livestock, and tax collectors receiving tribute. These images serve not merely as decoration, but as a message that the pharaoh was a guardian of Ma'at, the cosmic order, ensuring not only spiritual transition, but the material prosperity of Egypt. However, Una's reign also revealed a deeper truth. The pharaoh's power was no longer absolute. As the sun temples in Heliopolis grew in wealth and influence, and regional nobles, nomarchs, gained increasing autonomy and resources, centralized royal authority began to erode. This growing decentralization set the stage for the political turmoil of the 6th dynasty and the first intermediate period that followed. After the death of Unuz, the throne passed to Teti, 2345 to 2333 BC, the founder of the 6th dynasty. He strengthened his legitimacy by marrying Ipet-I, daughter of Unuz, but simultaneously began delegating significant power to officials and priests, especially the nomarchs and the clergy of Heliopolis, causing royal authority to gradually fragment. Teti's pyramid at Saqqara was small and contained pyramid texts inside, continuing the tradition started by Unuz. Teti's reign ended abruptly and tragically. Ancient records suggest that he may have been assassinated by his own courtiers, a reflection of court instability and internal palace conflicts. In the brief void that followed, a shadowy figure emerged, Userkare, 2333 to 2332 BCE. Many scholars believe he may have been a usurper, taking advantage of Teddy's sudden death to seize power for a very short time, perhaps only a few months or years. The throne then passed to Pepi I, 2332 to 2283 BCE. Son of Teddy and Ipit I, he became one of the most powerful pharaohs of the 6th dynasty, reigning for nearly 50 years. Under Pepi I, Egypt's bureaucratic system expanded dramatically. He promoted numerous nomarchs in distant provinces to better manage tax collection and manpower. However, this policy inadvertently empowered local nobility, planting the seeds for future political division. Pepi I is also remembered for his military and trade expeditions. He sent troops and trade delegations to Nubia to acquire gold and ivory, to punt for incense and myrrh, to Sinai to extract copper and turquoise, and to Byblos, modern Lebanon, to obtain valuable cedar wood. Reliefs in his mortuary temple at Saqqara depict merchant ships, hunters, and tribute bearers, serving as both art and visual records of Egypt's economy and foreign relations during his reign. Religiously, during Pepi I's time, sun temples were no longer built with the frequency seen in earlier reigns. Instead, pyramids continued to be constructed, with pyramid texts becoming more elaborate, evidence of maturing royal funerary tradition. Artistic reliefs reached new levels of finesse, portraying not only deities, but also everyday scenes of farmers, artisans, soldiers, and court rituals. After Pepi I, the throne passed to his son Merenra I, 2283 to 2278 BC. Though he ruled for only about 5 years, Merenra was remembered as a dynamic ruler. He continued campaigns into Nubia, securing trade routes for gold and ivory, and even opened new trade routes across the western desert, linking Egypt with oases and distant regions. However, the defining feature of his reign was his reliance on local officials. Merenra granted extensive authority to nomarchs, empowering them to collect taxes and administer provinces. This made the central government increasingly dependent on provincial nobility, a trend that would have dire consequences in the following decades. His pyramid at Saqqara was modest in size, and while it contained pyramid texts, it lacked the grandeur of earlier monuments, signaling a decline in the state's resources and prestige. Following Merenra, the throne passed to Pepi II, 2278 to 2184 BCE, a pharaoh known not just in Egyptian history, but in all of human history, as he is believed to have ruled for 94 years, the longest reign of any monarch. He ascended the throne at around 6 years old, under the regency of his mother. During the early years, Egypt remained stable. Expeditions continued to Nubia, Punt, and Libya, with returning ships laden with incense, wood, gold, animal skins, and other luxury goods. The military remained a strong force at the borders, but the pharaoh's reign, too long, became a double-edged sword. As Pepi II aged, royal power weakened dramatically. The nomarchs, once appointed by his father, had by now become immensely wealthy and powerful, controlling vast lands, resources, and even private armies. The bureaucratic machine grew bloated, corrupt, and ineffective at managing the entire nation. Farmers were burdened with heavy taxation and forced labor, while the royal palace grew increasingly extravagant. Legends describe Pepi II as a frail old king, detached from reality, indulging in eccentric amusements, an image of a court decaying in luxury, disconnected from the people. By the time Pepi II died, after nearly a century of rule, Egypt was nearly exhausted. Some Greek sources, especially Herodotus and Manetho, claim that the throne passed to a female pharaoh named Nitocris. She was portrayed as a queen of vengeance, building a banquet hall and then drowning those who had murdered her brother in a river of blood. However, modern scholars believe that Nitocris may have been a legend or confusion with another king's name. Whether real or myth, the story of Nitocris reflects a deeper truth. The 6th dynasty ended in chaos and folklore, no longer marked by the glory of great pyramids, but by the long shadow of a dynasty too protracted, too feeble, leading Egypt into the first intermediate period, a time of fragmentation and crisis.